Okay, welcome to chapter 3, except it's chapter 8, grief and crisis. So, as I said earlier, this is kind of can be an emotional topic, can be a tough topic. And seriously, anytime, if you just feel like I need to take a breather, feel free to get up and walk out and take a few breaths because it can be heavy. So, grief is the experience and natural feelings that come with loss. And when we think of grief, we think of death. And that is a lot of what our grief work is around here at A New Day. But there's grief over any kind of loss. And so that'll be something new to consider when people come in and they're talking about various issues in their life. We can hear things and we can go, oh, it sounds like maybe you're grieving that. And that's helpful for people, for us to be able to label some of that loss that they're going through as grief. So the definition of grief is a keen mental suffering or distress over a loss or affliction, a sharp sorrow, a painful regret. So just that definition, you can feel, ugh, that's hard. So the obvious losses that we can easily, say, oh, you must be grieving over this, would be the death of a loved one, separation or divorce, because in a sense that's a death also. That's a death of a relationship, a rape or violent crime. Again, that's the loss of innocence. Maybe the loss of a feeling of safety would cause that grief. A loss of a home, whether through financial, fire, or legal means. And then the loss of other significant things can cause grief. If, I knew a guy who had this favorite little sports car and ended up, wrecking it and lost it, and it was irreplaceable. And it caused him a lot of grief. And I couldn't quite get that at first, but I went, you know what? That was so important to him. Since I'm not a car person, I didn't get it, but I had to suspend my judgment and realize that's so important to him. The loss of a wedding ring. Again, if it's important to you, and I'll tell you this funny story. My husband and I were at one of our first trips to Kauai, and he's out swimming, and he lost his wedding ring. But we were having such a great time, and he came up, he says, I lost my ring. And I said, oh my gosh, he says, and he looked at me and says, I give my ring to Kauai. And I said, no, you don't. Get down there and find that ring. I mean, of course he couldn't find it, but it didn't even bother him. And I thought, oh, it didn't even bother you? No, I gave it to Kauai. So, but in general, if I lost my ring, I'd be upset. So, the loss of a job is, can be very upsetting. Loss of money, a robbery. And I've heard of people who've had their homes burglarized, and they're extremely traumatized with someone coming in and going through their stuff, and it's a grief process for them after being burglarized. So all those things cause grief. Less obvious losses. Again, these are the important things as a counselor to look for and be able to label as grief for your clients. The loss of a dream, something that you always wanted to do and you realize it's just not going to happen. The loss of health, chronic illness. Yeah. The loss of innocence, menopause, just even, getting older, the loss, the awareness that you can't do what you used to do, the awareness that there's some things you're not going to be able to do anymore. And then big changes, especially for kids, right? Moving schools, different teachers, having to make new friends. Kids grieve when they go through that process. Loss of youth, beauty, hair or teeth. The loss of your sex drive. So all of those, when our clients are talking about some of these things, and we can say, wow, it sounds like maybe you're really grieving the loss of the ability to, do that, big trip that you always wanted to do, and you're realizing now that's just not going to happen. It sounds like maybe you're grieving that. And often our clients will go, yeah, I guess so. They haven't even framed it that way. But somehow by labeling that, it helps sort of ground them, and it gives validity to their pain. And it's very helpful for them. It's kind of like when we talked about labeling feelings, how that helps clients. Labeling grief helps clients as well. And these are limbo losses, again, that we can help our clients frame as grief. If you're waiting, the reports of medical tests and you don't know how they're going to go, that's very anxiety provoking. Potentially getting a fatal diagnosis, being on the brink of divorce, you can feel it coming, and it's very painful. That's a limbo loss. A missing person. And in my family, I think in many families, when there's a family member who's, using drugs and you don't see them for a long time, they just sort of disappear, you don't hear from them, they don't show up. It causes a lot of grief. When you quarrel with your spouse, and I'm not just talking about a basic bicker, but something that really feels deep in your gut, we grieve that. It's a scary place to be. Is my spouse going to really be there for me? Uncertain business transactions, a lawsuit, and placing one's house on the market can cause grief for some, even if it's by choice. Yeah, we want to downsize, we're excited about it, but going through the house, this is where my kids had their, playroom, and there's grief associated with people selling their homes. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So basically, anything taken away or denied can be a source of grief for a person. Any gap between hope and reality. And interestingly, losing something negative can cause a person to grieve. We can have a client who has been able to finally maybe give up an affair that this person has been having because they want to save their marriage, but they're grieving having to give up that affair. It's really important for us to be able to bracket our judgment about that and be able to acknowledge with them that that's hard and it's painful. So people can grieve even negative things that they're giving up or don't have anymore. Empty nesting definitely can cause grief for mamas, for those of us that have been through it. We don't like it. It's hard. And spiritual battles and disappointments can cause us grief. When a person's in the middle of a disappointment and they feel spiritually that God has not been there for them, like a crisis of faith can cause grief. So typical emotional responses to loss: helplessness, fear, emptiness, despair, pessimism, irritability, anger, and guilt. Guess we're turning our page. Thank you. Okay. And then physical. So can you relate to all these emotional responses? Because all of us have been through grief, one way or another. We've all experienced grief, even at some of your young ages. There's been some grief. So can you relate to some of these feelings that maybe you went through when you were going through grieving, these emotional feelings? Yeah. And here are some physical responses to loss. Because, we're a unit. We're mind, body, spirit. We're a unit. So when we're grieving and we're suffering mentally, we suffer physically. So restlessness, inability to concentrate, loss of energy, loss of motivation, unsettled stomach, disconnectedness, just not even know, floating in and out of time, especially when you're grieving the death of a loved one. Any of these changes: appetite, sleep patterns, sexual drive, grooming, and then fatigue. We can be accident prone when we're grieving. Absolutely, definitely accident prone. One interesting thing about these physical responses to loss is something you know what to look for maybe in a family member or a close friend when you see changes in sleep patterns, self-grooming, those kind of things. It could be a good time to even ask them, are you grieving? And I say that because I had that experience with someone in my family, and some of you don't know this, but I think most of you know that my daughter died when she was 9. And I had another family member who had never grieved. And a lot of times children don't grieve right away. They might for a minute, but it's all too much. And then the next minute they'll be playing. They kind of come in and out of it. Or they're just not mentally ready to go through that process. And I tell my, adults who are worried about their children, as long as they are getting along with their friends, functioning, everything seems to be going okay, don't worry about it. Just, notice that there'll be a time that it shifts, and that will be the time to attend to it. And one of the things that I noticed in this person was just sleeping extremely long hours, and also not very good self-care in terms of grooming, just kind of out of the blue. For me, it was out of the blue, and those were kind of clues that there's something going on. So that's something to notice. Okay. So here's some quotes by C.S. Lewis. "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing." At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's so uninteresting. Yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty. If only they would talk to one another and not to me. So it's that, and I can relate to that feeling. I don't know if any of you have been through, the death of a close loved one, but it's it is feeling like you're a bit in a fog, and you can see people doing things, but you're not really present. So I think that explains it well. If you're close to someone who's going through that, you can get, that's a pretty good description, I think. So I'm sure you've all heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, right? Who hasn't? Okay, great. She in 1969 she became the forefront person on death and dying, and she came up with 5 stages of grief. And I think she based these 5 stages on working with patients who were terminally ill with cancer, and she came up with these stages that these patients went through. But I think the world kind of misunderstood that, and we took it on as these are the stages that people go through in grief. And it's really not that simple. It's much messier. It's not linear. In grief, we don't necessarily go through all of these stages. I found it very annoying when I was grieving when somebody wanted to decide what stage I was in. It's just not like that. It's just not like that. But these are well-known stages, and these are well-known emotions that people go through when they're grieving: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And it kind of makes sense when you think about someone who's been given a terminal is that what it is? Prognosis? Thank you. Yeah, so that makes sense for that person, right? Oh, I don't have that. So it makes sense for in that case, but in other cases, it really doesn't. So yeah, there's no typical response. Responses are messy. All different kinds of feelings come up. they go, another feeling comes up, and it's just not linear. Our individual grief is unique. No one person's grief looks like another person's grief. Okay. Bereavement is that period of mourning, especially after the death of a loved one. And that period of mourning after the death of a loved one lasts a lot longer than we want it to, and it lasts a lot longer than other people want it to. And different friends and and when I counsel a lot of grieving people. That's kind of one of my specialties. And often we agree, wouldn't it be great if we could be like, go back to how the old European countries handled it, and you wore black for a year? It basically said, I can't think, I can't do anything, don't bug me, don't talk to me, just a black, but I would say you should get to wear black for about 3 years. But yeah, bereavement is it's just, a period of mourning, especially after the death of a loved one. And during bereavement, we're not getting over the loss. We're going through the pain of dealing with our mourning. And it's painful. And so some people will avoid that grief as long as possible because it's hard and it's painful. But my best advice to people grieving is to lean into it, to, go through it. And there's no easy way. It's kind of, you can't go over it, you can't go around it, you can't go under it. You can stall it for a while, but grief waits for you. So my best advice is just to lean in. And it's so wonderful that I think all of us here have a faith, and that makes such a big difference in grieving if we can just lean into God. It really makes a world of difference, but not everyone has that luxury. So those of us counseling someone grieving, I see us as people that stand in the gap for them and encourage them and normalize what's going on for them. Yeah, it makes sense that you can't do that. Yeah, I get it. And we don't get a lot of people coming in for grief counseling right away. It's later, because what happens is 3, 4, 6 months down the road, your friends, your neighbors feel like that you should be over it, that you should be moving on, and they kind of are tired of us grieving. And that is when people need additional support, because they still have a lot more work to do, but their support system may be depleted. So they come in and we can normalize we get it. Yeah, you have a long way to go and it's hard, and we're here for you. And we talk our grief to death. So good that you're here. Something that we do that I do in all of my sessions, and something that we can do for people that we love that are grieving, is to ask about their loved one. One of my dearest friends called me very often and would say, hi Reese, what are you thinking about Avery today? And it was like a really hard question, but I loved it because then I got to talk about her. People grieving someone also love to hear their loved one's name. So if you can, just her saying that her name was good for me. Yeah. So we talk our grief to death. And again, a friend or a family member that is in mourning, sometimes we see them and we think, oh, they're doing well now. I don't want to mention anything about their loved one because it looks like they're, I want to keep it on. But the reality is, and again, those of you who have lost someone very close to you, you know that your loved one is just right here. It's on the tip of your brain. It's not, you might be doing okay from it, but it's right there. And we're always thinking about our loved one. So it's not intrusive to ask about our loved one. Don't ever be afraid to ask about somebody's loved one when they're mourning. It's a gift. It's a gift that you give to people. And so that's why sometimes, again, people come into counseling because they had that support for many months, but it's not there anymore. So we're there for them. That's why I'm a big fan of grief groups, because those people understand each other. And I think that's a wonderful thing. Grief groups are a wonderful thing. So just the passing of time does not heal the heart. It does take time, but it also takes grief work, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But something that really helped me on my grief journey was this phrase, learning to love in separation. And this was by Thomas Addig, and I kind of came across him at one of my seminars on grief. But I was at that place where, how do I move on? And you're supposed to go and do acceptance, and you're supposed to let go. And I was quite clear I couldn't do any of that stuff. And so somehow I felt like, well, I guess I never get to get better because I'm not willing to let go. I'm not ever going to let go. So, but this phrase, learning to love in separation, really helped me. And I think it helps a lot of people who are grieving to realize you don't have to let go. You love in separation. You continue to love that person. It's okay. And he talks about a transition from loving in presence to loving in separation. And so, and it's true. We carry that person in our heart, right? In fact, I have this, sometimes when I feel like I might have a rough day, this sounds maybe a little, I don't know, weird. I'll wear my little locket because I have my kids' little pictures in here. And it's just different little things are sometimes helpful. So we continue to love. It doesn't matter. My daughter's died 25 years ago. So a long time. But, I don't love her less. And she's still really important to me. So Thomas Addig talked about continuing bonds. It's okay to continue to remember them. It's okay to remember feeling their love. And it's okay to continue to express love for them. That's very freeing for people who are grieving. And it's kind of sometimes a new concept for them. So it's something that we can share in the counseling room with them. That phrase, learning to love in separation. And then David Kessler, who did a lot of work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, came up with the 6th stage of grief, which is finding meaning. And that means basically eventually reorganizing life in light of the loss. So coming to a new normal. So finding meaning from your loss. It doesn't mean that your loss still isn't greater than the meaning you're finding, right? That's still very painful. But being able to, in my words, use your pain and your loss for God's glory. That's a way of finding meaning in your loss. For me, that's a personal thing. And Gerald Sitzer says, I believe that recovery from such a loss is an unrealistic and even harmful expectation, if by recovery we mean resuming the way we lived and felt prior to the loss. So I like that word new normal, because you never go back to normal after a very significant loss. I mean, my daughter died 25 years ago, and my memory's getting, fuzzier and dimmer with age. But when I remember an event from 25, 30 years ago, I know if my daughter was alive or not, just from who I was. It's a very interesting. I just know. Oh, that was before 1995 when that happened. Oh no, I just know. It's interesting. We're different people. So we go through grief with grief work. And people do it, everybody does it differently. But these are just tools that I'm going to give you that you can help people who are struggling in their grief, tools that they can grab onto. What can I do? What can I do? And these have been very effective for people. So one way of grieving is through the arts. And I think it's I don't know why. Maybe it's left brain, right brain, but I don't know why. But grieving through the arts is very powerful, and all of these are arts. Journaling, right? Just journaling about your loved one, encouraging that. Another way to journal is to write a letter to your loved one. Maybe saying things that you always wanted to say. Maybe saying, today what I'm thinking about you is. But letter writing to your loved one is a healing journey for many people. Music, listening to music is grief work. It was for me. I would, and I just sort of created this, made this up myself, but I would get up and literally have my crying time, have my grieving time, and I would go down and lay on my couch and put in the CD of the music that we played at my daughter's service, and cry through that. And then I would play music that I had sort of choreographed that would get my eyes off of me and onto heaven and onto God. And I would, every morning, literally, I would lay there and go through these two CDs, and I'd probably lay on the couch for 45 minutes to an hour and really listen to the words. And that was my therapy. So I did music therapy. Dance. I know a young girl who was a dancer, and she choreographed a dance for her mom and performed that at a special event in honor of her mom. Singing is a good therapy, and I did a lot of that as well. I had been taking voice lessons anyway. I'd been singing with a church choir, or our choir was very little. It was a very little church at the time. And I decided that I was going to sing. And I got deeper into my voice lessons, and I would pick a song that really spoke to my heart, and I would work on it and work on it. And at the time, I was also helping to plan services. So when I thought it fit, I'd say, okay, I think this song will fit. And I'm going to sing this song. And they're going, you're going to sing this song? Yeah, I'm going to sing this song. And my poor husband, he was so nervous for me. He says, "What are you crazy?" Because we were still, barely walking down the road. And I said, "No, I'm going to do this." And so that was part of my therapy for probably a year. I did that, and it was healing, and I think it was healing for our church too, because again, our church was very small at the time, so everyone knew Avery. Painting can be very therapeutic. We have a Healing Through Arts group, and it's not always necessarily painting, it's different art projects, but just that focus is a healing process. Sewing. I know women who have taken different pieces of clothing of their loved ones and made a quilt, and it's very meaningful for them. I know another woman who made teddy bears for other children. So sewing can be a healing process. Scrapbooking and photo albums. I mean, look at how many times at a memorial service, how that process of getting all those pictures together, now it's more of a slideshow of the person who passed away. That's a very healing process for the family to get together and do that. Look at all these pictures and pick out the pictures, and yeah. And websites, just the one I just shared with Thomas Addick, it's a grieving website. There are different websites. You sort of have to be careful because some will get a little cuckoo, but there's a lot of support on the internet for people who are grieving. So this is 5 ways that we grieve that Susan Berger came out with a book, and that she sort of kind of described people on their journey, how they grieve. So she described 5 different types of responses to major loss. So the first one are nomads. She talked, and basically these are people who aren't doing any grief work. They're kind of running from it. Maybe they just don't have the, internal resources to deal with it at the moment. But they don't maybe even understand how that loss is affecting their lives. They remain adrift and confused. and they're just lacking an anchor. They're just kind of adrift. We have, she describes memorialists, and you'll recognize this with a lot of people that you know probably. They preserve the memory of their loved one with tangible tributes, with rituals, with monuments, with names and labels, and with events. So who can think of any monuments or events that we have in our community or in any community? Can anybody think of one? Come on. Suzanne?
Well, they're all over the place.
Well, give me one.
Ronald Reagan's library and that beautiful building and gravesite where he and Nancy are interned.
Okay, great. Yeah. Can anybody else think of one? How about the Laura Wilcox building, named after Laura Wilcox? Are you familiar with that? It's one of our local buildings. The Turkey Trot, it was, started in memory of Michael Bratton Jr. Michael Bratton II, I guess it is. But those kinds of things. My friend, who I'm a cyclist. I ride bikes with a group of women, and one of my friend's husbands died from Alzheimer's, and she twice a year we do a fundraiser ride for Alzheimer's that she kind of spearheads and drags a bunch of people around. And that's to in memory of him. That's her mission now, is to raise money for that disease. And then we have normalizers, and these are people who what they really want to do is just recreate and replace the life they lost or wished for. They just have to, as quickly as they can, make it normal for them. And frankly, the best example I see, and I see this quite often, is older men, widows, especially. Is that widows or widowers? Widows? I don't know. Widowers. Mm-hmm. The older men quickly want to remarry. It's just a thing. And the reason I'm aware of it is that what happens is there's oftentimes fallout from the adult children. He doesn't know what he's doing. But in many cases, he does. For him, that's the best thing. So widowers are often normalizers. Activists. Oh, I think I talked about this, focusing on helping others with the same disease. They look to have a positive impact, create social justice for others, raise funds, educate, empower, and participate. So this is all grief work. Whoever started this stuff had a reason to start this and has a passion to do it. And a lot of us just join in and support them. But really the core of it is grief work. And seekers seek to adopt belief systems to create meaning. So often people who have not had much of a spiritual life in the past are searching. They become, seekers. They look into religion, philosophy, spiritual inquiry. They value connection with the other. They're basically just looking for God, right? And they want to share life with those holding similar beliefs. And again, those of us with a strong faith are blessed usually to have some community to lean into that naturally understands us, that supports us. So it's really a major thing that we have. So Henry Cloud says that experiencing sadness and honoring that feeling does not make you weak. One of the most important processes in life is grief. When bad things happen in life, we have to work through them. Working through bad things is a little like digesting food. In life, we basically digest experience. We walk through it, take it in, use what is useful, and eliminate the waste. When someone dies, or where there is another kind of loss or injury in life, we have to be able to work through that experience and move on. leaving our hearts available for new experiences and relationships. We get rid of the hurt and pain by grieving, grief work, and then keep the learning experiences and the love that come with it. Please.
How do you discern between someone who's a normalizer and using that as like a part of the healing process, and someone who's moving rapidly but in order to avoid grief? Are there any markers, and how would you encourage them?
That's a good question. And the second one is moving rapidly, maybe to avoid. Yeah. I think everybody grieves differently, and I wouldn't necessarily say that either one is not grieving, but I hear what you're saying is if they're moving too rapidly and we're close to them, we might just encourage them to take a breath, to help slow down. In general, they say not to make any big decisions right after a major loss for a year. That's kind of the rule of thumb. However, everybody's different. I mean, I know someone who just went through an excruciating grieving process and did this major move, but it was good for her. So, it's hard to say. I guess I don't have a good answer for that, but just staying close and loving them, and helping them think about pros and cons, because when we're grieving, we don't think real clearly. That is true. Sometimes we need help thinking things through. Yeah. To avoid the pain of loss would be to avoid the love and the life we shared. So, Psalm 23, walking through the shadow, the valley of the shadow of death. I think before I was grieving, I used to think that was about someone dying, walking through the valley of the shadow. I thought that was a person dying, walking through the valley of the shadow of death. But after going through grief, I realized, no, it's the grieving person. We're the ones walking through the valley of the shadow of death. So, yeah, reading that psalm in light of that can be helpful to you or to your clients as well. It's been that thought and that idea has been very helpful for some of my clients. Okay, so we're going to go through this and we're going to do a little practice. Okay, so in counseling the grieving client, actually what I'm going to do first is we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to do a little role playing with each other, okay? So we're going to take like a 10-minute break, and I'm going to make you get up and move around because you need to. and what I want you to be thinking about when you come back is to flip back to that first page, and where it says, less obvious losses or limbo, or, I don't know that anyone in here is anyone in here grieving the death of someone or something huge like that? No? Okay. Because I was going to say, I want you to pick a real issue for you, but I don't want you to pick a really heavy issue. So I want you to look through these losses and just see if that triggers something for you, either that you're going through, that you have gone through, so that when we role play, you can be a good client. And remember, it's really not about really helping the client when we're role playing. It's really about helping the therapist practice. So you're not going to get any closure or major help. It's just we're going to give the therapist a chance to do some practicing. So think about a loss that you can bring into the counseling room when we come back. Okay, let's take a break. Okay, so when we're counseling, and of course, Kristen, you didn't get a chance to do this, but most everyone else we did that active listening week 2, and we use that same format with whatever the issue is. So when we're counseling the grieving client, we're going to listen actively and respond reflectively. We're going to normalize their experience. I think that's the biggest thing with grief that's a little different maybe. Is that we really camp a lot on normalizing, because again, people grieving coming to us are often down the road a bit, and they feel like they should be doing better, and so does everyone else, and we need to normalize it. No, it makes sense, and it is difficult because everybody's expecting that, but you are absolutely where you're supposed to be. So we really want to focus on normalizing for our grieving clients. As I said, we want to explore and expand the life story of their lost one. Tell me more about your husband. What was he like? Just give them that opportunity to talk about their loved one. We talk our grief to death. And we encourage grieving rituals as appropriate. What if they say they're doing a certain thing, but my family thinks I'm crazy? I'm going to the graveyard every Sunday, and my family thinks I need to stop because it's been 6 months. Well, if that's suiting them, it's fine. We encourage. It's okay to do what you need to do. We encourage the client to get additional relational support, and like I said, I'm a big fan of grief groups if that's available for them. So yeah, we allow the expression of emotions and help the client identify and label feelings. And again, that's something we do in every case, in every session. We help clients label their feelings. And we do that as they're talking, because as a culture, we tend to talk more about content than our feelings. As they're talking, we can say, oh, wow, it sounds like maybe you're feeling pretty sad about that. Or am I right? If we always do things tentatively, am I right, and ask, we can't go wrong, because our client will correct us. So but we help them get feeling words on the table. So we listen for feelings, and we check them out with our client. We acknowledge that each person reacts and grieves differently. We provide comfort, understanding, and acceptance. And if appropriate, we help the client lean on God. We don't ever evangelize, but we sense where our clients are after one session. And if there is an element of faith there, it's so powerful that we can use with them. Again, validating that grieving takes time, more time than they want it to take, and more time than others around them want it to take. And we talk our grief to death. Okay, so I brought us in some little, make sure I am here. I should have paid attention to where I was. We're going to use our little session notes that we used in that second class. And I think I showed you this. No, I don't have. But so go ahead and flip them over. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There's the cheater method. So see, Karina remembers. Let me use yours. So I fold it like this, so that you can see your skills that you want to use. So you can just go ahead and take any notes you want to take here. But right here, when you're talking with your client at the top, you can see things that you couldn't. You're mostly just listening and responding. But if you kind of come up against a wall, you know what to do. You can look down at your little paper and go, tell me more about it. So especially those good questions, they're really helpful. Okay? So I guess we'll do a group of 3 and a group of 2. I guess, should we do 2 and 3? Does that sound good? You 2 and you? So let's come find some rooms. Oh. How did it go? How did you do, clients? Tell me how as a client, tell me how your counselor was.
Suzanne was great.
Yeah?
I think she did a good job of just letting me, just letting me talk.
Yeah.
And even just keeping quiet for a little bit longer to let me think of oh yeah, this too, and not feeling the need to fill the silence, So yeah, that was really good for me.
Yeah. Yeah, so you got to experience, it's okay to sit in silence for a little bit for my client while she gathers her thoughts. Yeah. Nice. Nice. How about you, Suzanne? How was your experience with as a client?
As a client, well, I sort of I was hard because I sort of modeled my story or my interaction from like a combination of clients that I've actually met with.
Oh.
And as you know, I've had some challenging and interesting experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, not easy, but always easy to listen and just quietly take it in and
Yeah.
not have too much. Never give advice. Never give advice, but never have too much to say. Just let them talk, because really people have the answers inside, but sometimes it just takes a processing and the opportunity to process with another person listening in.
Yeah. So, Karina, how was your experience?
It was good. I felt, as a client, I felt validated and heard and comforted, which was kind of a step further, which was nice.
Yeah.
I felt like she asked me good questions to try to understand more than what I said right up front. So
Good questions, yeah.
That's good.
Okay. Your counselor gets an A, whoever that was.
Yes.
Was that you, Kaylin?
I don't know.
Oh, it was Kristen?
Kristen.
Okay. How was your experience, Kristen?
It was good. Kaylin had some personal experiences similar to mine, and so it was really nice that she was able to give that insight and give. She was just able to relate in a way that made me feel comfortable, because I could tell she really understood, and it was nice not to have to explain everything, but feel like, okay, you really know what I'm talking about. So we connected pretty early. Yeah.
Nice. And how about, what was your experience like, Kaylin?
Mine was good too. She was it's like using anything real, even if it's little, it can be kind of like, oh, this is actually kind of real. Like it can, and I had Karina, and she was really good about just making it a calm experience, not reacting in any way, even though I used one that was pretty serious and pretty new in my life, and her reactions were very calming and just this is normal, and yeah, she had good pauses for me to process my own thoughts, and then when I didn't have anything to say, really good things to kind of lead me on. I think today I'm getting a little stuck because I have a headache, so I'm kind of I don't want to keep digging, so she asked good guiding questions to keep me processing when maybe I didn't feel so much continuing going, so that was pretty good. Good for today.
So what major takeaways does anybody have from your experience?
Maybe just the comfort of being known. Other people know your situation, like you said, but they can be tired of it, and you still have to experience it. So the comfort of somebody new hearing it for the first time and being able to share that sympathy and that just listening ear, that was really good.
Thank you. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to share?
I think just acknowledging to that, or listening to you before, and then having this exercise, just seeing that there isn't a solution to the problem,
Right.
but instead that any person with their feelings are valid, and whatever they're grieving, wherever they're at, that is valid and okay, and I don't know, just to meet them in that place, and there's no right or wrong or solution to it necessarily,
Right.
you know?
Because it's a process, right? Grief is a process.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Anybody else have anything you want to share?
I think maybe just not being afraid to ask more questions when someone does share something. I think it can be nerve-wracking to ask things that maybe would go too deep or bother them, but seeing that people, like Kaylin said, people want to be known, and so it's okay to ask them because then they're always happy to share, or they feel comforted by someone caring enough to ask those questions. So just an encouragement to do that.
Yeah. And it's nice to experience being that client, to have that experience too, right? To go, oh, that felt good. And to realize as a client, it helps you as a counselor to realize as a client, as you said, Karina, there might not be the answer. It's just a process of letting that person be heard, feel known, and sort of, carrying their pain with them, right? Yeah. Great. You all get an A. So, okay, let's talk about crisis. I like this little fun fact that there's a Chinese character, and the symbol for crisis is, one symbol is danger, and the other symbol is opportunity. So in crisis, it's always like, potentially scary, dangerous, but there's that opportunity to get through it and be even more resilient. There's that opportunity to come out at an even higher level of functioning through crisis. So that's an interesting thought. Also, what I wanted to say is, here at A New Day, we are not a crisis counseling center. We're a counseling center. People call in and do appointments. We do occasionally have people just walk in, but in those cases, either Keith or I usually take them. So as a lay counselor, you would not, typically, you would not be given a crisis client. We do have a couple of our counselors that have been here a very long time, and I would feel totally comfortable asking them to do that if that came up. But it's really not a lot of what we do here. So this section is just more for your information, and just maybe to have in your tool belt, but not what you would be asked to do here at A New Day. So emotional responses during crisis are helplessness, fear, ambivalence, detachment, high anxiety, could be anger, could be feeling codependent, really wants somebody to come save them, and guilt. So there's all these kind of emotions stirred up in a person in crisis. It's like overwhelm. So to help someone who is in crisis, the first thing we do is make contact. And what that means is establish rapport. What we do with every single client that comes in to our room, we take time to just listen, just the same things that we do with everything, to validate them. They want to be heard. We just create a safe place for them to talk. And 90% of what we do in that crisis situation is just create safety. Just be there, listen, stay calm, breathe, because they can sort of regulate off of us. So if we're calm, centered, it helps calm their whole system down. I said this earlier too, but a really good tool that we have in any kind of jacked up situation is our voice. Because as we slow down and we lower our voice, it sort of lowers the temperature for everyone, right? So remember, your voice is a really good tool to use when the temperature's hot. So we make contact, we reduce anxiety, and which helping skill helps reduce anxiety that we talk about, that we always want to be looking for in our counseling room? Looking for feelings, right? Helping them identify their feelings. helps people to reduce their anxiety because they feel heard at a deeper level. It's beyond the content, right? So looking for feelings. In crisis intervention, we focus on the issues, what they've come in for. We assess for risks and threats. So are they a danger to themselves? Are they a danger to someone else? If so, what's the protocol for that? And we assess for physical needs. Have they eaten? Maybe they haven't had food for a while. What's their sleeping situation? And it's really unfortunate because we don't have the resources to help people that I wish we did in our community. But we can do what we can. We can give them the different resources that we have, and hopefully something can help them through. We had Women of Worth here last week to speak to our lay counseling staff. And she was sharing that they no longer have their transition home, but they do have a lot of other resources. So knowing what our community's resources are is really helpful as a counselor. Knowing that, they can maybe help you get a hotel for just a couple of nights if you're escaping a violent environment. They can help you with your paperwork for a restraining order. So just knowing what our resources are. Encouraging action, okay? This is your situation. What do you think you might want to do? And then we follow up. Get their number, call them, see how that went. Ask them to call us the next day. In any kind of crisis situation, we try to follow up the next day and check in on our clients. So we go into that room just remembering our own limits and boundaries. What we usually have to offer is a safe place for that client to process what their options are. We don't always have the answers, right? We stay calm and slow things down. We're careful not to do the client's work. We're careful not to tell them what to do, tell them what we would do, give advice. We're careful not to do those things. We don't promise things that we're going to do if it's not 100% sure that we can do that. And we always help them with resources for referral. In our county, we have the 211. It's the best number in the world. They really do know everything. You dial 211 on your phone, and they're the most helpful people. I can't remember. I called for something. Maybe it was when I was trying to get my vaccine. I can't really remember. But then, he asked my age, so I'm older. Then, do you know about, other resources that he thought I might need based on my age, which I didn't need any of. But he was following up and, do you know we have this for you if you need that? Do you know we have that for you? It was really amazing. Really, it's an amazing service. So problem solving. When people are, trying to make a decision, they're coming in crisis, do I go this way or that way? We just try to provide a framework for them. We try to calm down and just create space for them to logically think through what their options are. We try to stay non-reactive to the client's process because some of their options might be pretty crazy. Okay, so one option is, okay. We just listen and we write, help them figure out what they want to do, but we stay non-reactive. Gentle reflection, which is what you're all doing in the counseling room, right? We always maintain a positive regard for our client. People in crisis are already feeling maybe a little diminished, a little helpless, and we want to be respectful and thoughtful of them during that process because they're in a vulnerable place. We want to enhance the client's sense of control over current and future problems. So we don't want to be the answer man. We don't want to create an environment where the client feels that they want to be dependent on us. We want to empower our clients. That's the goal. We want to empower our clients. And we want to help client recognize and release the things they can't control. So that's always helpful to realize, okay, This is one step beyond what you have control over. We help the client generate options for dealing with problems. We help them examine the pros and cons of each one. Okay, tell me what would happen if you did this. Tell me the good things about that. Oop, tell me this side of that option. So we just help them because their brain is scrambled. So we just help them go through this kind of little checklist, pros and cons, what your choices are. And again, we give feedback, not advice. What would happen if you did that? Okay. We again help them clarify their goals, what they came in looking for. And then we help them rehearse the steps required to carry out those options. Okay, so you've decided that you are going to go down to Habitat for Humanity. How are you going to get there? You know, just what a really basic, because again, people in crisis, their brain is scrambled. So that's just something for you to have in your toolkit on crisis intervention. But as I said, you would not be called upon to do that here. So we're going to close. I think this is my last thing. The Holmes Ray Life Stress Inventory. Are you familiar with that one? Anybody? Well, this is this was developed in 1967, so it's kind of old. But if you go through here and you give yourself a score for all of these life events that may have happened to you in the last year, you add this score up. The first one, which says death of a spouse, it's also death of a spouse or child, is 100. So you take all these stresses, you add them up, and then at the end, if you have a score of 100 or 50 or more, that increases your chance of stress-related illness by 30%. In other words, once again, we're that mind-body emotional unit, and when we have a whole lot of life stresses, it increases our chance of illness. So that says, okay, I need to get extra support to stay healthy. I'm going to have to maybe, do some more counseling. I'm going to have to be very proactive in my self-care. I'm going to have to take that time for myself, for that prayer and meditation and that exercise. If you have a score from 150 to 300, you have a 50% more chance of a stress-related illness. And over 300 increases it by 80%. So what's useful about this is that it can sort of highlight, if you have a client that has all this stuff going on, it helps them understand, no wonder you're feeling so overwhelmed. Look at what this, we normalize it. Okay, now we have to really hunker down and do some self-care. So how are we going to keep you healthy? Because you have all of these life stresses going on. And we do have clients that come in with a whole lot of life stresses. So I'm going to give you just a minute to do your own. So go ahead and go through this and see what you got. Okay. Karina, are you done with yours?
I'm done.
You're done. Okay. Okay, so who wants to share their score?
Mine's pretty low. Mine's 89.
Excellent. Great health. Low stress life. Good for you. Yeah. Anybody else want to share?
Mine's pretty drastic from that. 523.
Wow.
I think I should have already died or something.
Wow. So isn't that good that says, you know what? I need to really focus on my self-care.
Very eye-opening.
Yeah. When I did mine was really off the charts as well. And I remember thinking, gosh, I'm doing pretty good. I'm like still upright. It did the opposite. It made me feel good about myself because my score was like crazy.
I don't see the second page.
Yes?
Oh.
You don't see
I
what?
didn't see the second page.
Oh, no wonder you did so well, Ellie.
Neither did I.
Oh, you didn't either?
No.
Oh my gosh.
That's totally different, but that's okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Well, go home and do the second page, and just it's just a good little thing. Did you do all of yours, Suzanne?
Mine's very low.
What is it?
You know, I think retirement is just awesome. Let me give you all hope.
Oh, thank you.
Because if I had been where you said in the last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really just the social isolation and during COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
And that wasn't, they didn't give any points for that. I guess they think that's a good thing or something. Or
Well,
maybe
well,
they're
this is just an
contemplating
old survey. It's this is a pre-COVID situation. Okay. Well, do you have any questions about today or?
I actually had a couple of thoughts about this list. Two different situations that you didn't really talk about, but just that, like, if somebody had not been dealing with these types of things in a healthy way,
Yes.
or they were in denial or shut down or conditioned to not feel,
Yes.
then it could really pile up, and when the dam broke, it could be much bigger than, even though you said the test is for in the last year,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there could be situations where it could be compounded.
Yeah.
So that I was thinking about that, and another thought was just also when some of these things happen and they're connected to something bigger.
Mm-hmm. So it could be even bigger than that, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Anybody else have any response to that? Okay, well, thank you for being brave and coming today and hanging in there with me and letting me talk so long. Let me close in prayer. Okay, Lord, I just thank you for this day. Special gratitude for Kenny for all the time he's donating to us and expertise, and just pray that this time would glorify you and would be just another tool for Jesus to be seen in our world. Amen. Okay. Thank you for coming.